We've had over 1,000 students go through the Video 4X program. And after having 1,000 students go through the program, we started identifying some of the areas where students make the biggest mistakes. In fact, you might be making some of these mistakes today. So I've put together an incredibly powerful and unique episode to break down our most common mistakes that we see students make and how to fix it. So keep on listening.
Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today is a unique episode because we're doing a different type of format we've never done before on this podcast. We are going to be bringing on a guest co-host to go through this episode with you. Now, what we decided to do is to bring on one of our coaches inside of our mentorship program. We're bringing on Miss Katie Soy, who has been on our podcast before, talking about the book she's written and building a business off of helping people craft their story. It was a very powerful episode. So if you haven't listened to that, I definitely recommend you go do that. But what I wanted to do is to bring her on to give you another perspective, to give you some insight that maybe I'm not seeing on some of the most common mistakes that we see our students make inside of our programs that stops their videos, their content, their messaging from being really effective. Now, we've had over 1,000 students go through the Video 4X program, so we have seen a lot of scripts. We have seen a lot of mistakes, and we have seen a lot of ways to fix those mistakes, and hopefully this episode will be incredibly valuable for you. So if you are making some of these mistakes, you'll know exactly how to start fixing them. So before we bring Katie on, before I unleash Katie to the world, what I wanted to do was go through some of the common mistakes that I see people make. And hopefully between my mistakes and the things that Katie sees, you'll be left with a very clear path on how to be a very effective communicator and content creator. Now, I guess the number one mistake that I see all the time that our students make is they just don't follow the process. And I kind of laughed this morning because I was, Taylor was telling me she was on a call with, watching a call that James Wedmore was doing with some of his students. And he was teaching them how to go through and do a live launch. And he said, okay, we do our launches on a Thursday, Friday, Thursday, or whatever the dates were. It was like a Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday, or something like that. And someone asked him, hey, James, do you think it would be okay if we did our live launch on this day, and this day? And he said, with all due respect, and I don't mean for this to sound ignorant or arrogant, but if you haven't done a multi-million-dollar launch with a live launch format, then I highly recommend you just follow the process. And it is so crazy to me how many people will go into our program and then just not follow the process. Like they take what we have and they combine it with what they know and they create something that isn't the program. They start taking action on things that aren't our formats, aren't our frameworks, aren't our process. And then they go like, well, things aren't working. And I have to remind people, just follow the process. So in order to fix that, just follow the process. You got to be able to trust the system, trust the process if you're going to invest in a mentor or a certain system or a certain philosophy. That's the number one mistake. The second mistake is not meeting the audience where they're at, and instead you're meeting the audience where you're at. And as a visionary, as an expert, as someone who's a master of your craft, you know a lot of things. You know what the audience is going to have to realize. You know what they're going to have to do. You know things that they haven't made the connection on. You know things that haven't entered their awareness yet. For example, if I was helping people become healthier and lose weight, I know that they are probably going to have to work on their subconscious beliefs and habits. Habits are the number one thing that you're going to need in order to become healthy and change your ways. And a lot of that is subconsciously driven. However, when I look at the audience thinks that it's diet and working out. right? That's the most common thing that the audience will think. So if I met them and was like, hey, you want to lose weight and get healthier? Well, you should probably work on your subconscious habits and your subconscious mind and changing and rewiring your brain patterns. They're gonna be like, what are you talking about? I just need to know the diet. And so one of the things that we see students do all the time is they meet the audience where they are, like where the visionary is, instead of meeting the audience where the audience is at. So in order to fix that, well, pay attention to where your audience is at. What are they doing? What are they thinking? What are they actually trying? And incorporate that into your scripts. The number 3 mistake that I see students make is explaining versus addressing the belief. And you have to understand, if you're going to meet your audience where they're at, then that means you also have to communicate to where they are at and what they believe and what they think is true and what they think is the right way. And I'm going to use that weight loss example again. Instead of me coming in and explaining why they need habits, like what most people will do is you'll say something like, you need to rewire your subconscious mind. And then they start explaining why they need to rewire the subconscious mind. And basically what you're doing is you're starting to try to explain why you're right and why the other audience is wrong. And what you're not doing is speaking to the subconscious mind. When we want to speak to the subconscious mind, we need to identify where is the audience at? What do they believe to be true? And I'm going to spend all of my time dismantling or discrediting what they think to be true. And as long as what they think to be true is causing them suffering, then that is a very powerful place to be. But the difference is when we create content and messaging and scripts from that place, it's not about us. It's not about our solutions. It's not about what we know they're going to have to realize or what our philosophy is or what our framework is or anything. It's all about identifying where they're at, putting the focus there and dismantling where they're at, because where they're at is causing them suffering. And I would say for me, those are the top 3 mistakes that I see people make inside of their scripts. But what I want to do is throw it over to my co-host, who now has worked with more students than I have when it comes to scripting inside of our mentorship program. And I'm going to have Katie come through and come on and go through her mistakes that she sees people make all the time and how to fix them. I have no idea what she's going to talk about, and I'm curious to see the mistakes that she makes, or I'm curious to see the mistakes that she sees our students make. So with that said, Katie, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Hello, New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast family, and thank you, Brandon, for having me today. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here as a guest host for the podcast. So exciting. And I'm chatting with you today on something that's near and dear to my heart, which is scripting and messaging. Brandon just mentioned his top 3 mistakes that we see our students making in their messaging that really stops their effectiveness and holds them back from being persuasive and from making an impact and from selling. So I'm going to throw a few more at you just from my perspective today. But first, if you don't know who I am, I've been a coach for Team Lucero for, 2.5 years now. Wow. And I coach primarily in our mentorship program. So you might see me, if you're one of our Video 4X students, I do pop into the Facebook group. So you might see me in there, but I primarily do our one-on-one calls with our mentorship students on scripting. That's my niche in the group. And in addition to being a coach, I'm also a storytelling coach for business in my own business. And so I help business owners craft personal, usually vulnerable stories that can make an impact with their audience and help them build trust and credibility and sell. And I help them, create that messaging and add it into their branding so that they are leading their business with heart and building that trust. And I'm also a writer. So I'm working on a children's series of audiobooks right now, and I have a membership community around that for parents. And so anything related to storytelling, scripting, messaging, persuasion is something that I love to talk about. So I want to just jump right in and chat with you and build on some of the things that Brandon just went over as far as some of the things that we see our students doing. If you're listening, you may be a student in our group, and if not, we hope that this can help you with the messaging that you are working on in your business. So the first thing I want to do is actually build on the last point that Brandon mentioned. This is something that's very common, and he already told you guys this, but we see everybody starting with explaining versus persuading. And it's really easy to get into this habit, and I know from firsthand experience because that is one of my natural tendencies. And if you have been in a corporate background at any time in your life, like I have, it just becomes standard practice to write and build from, your early case points, right? And then to your conclusion. That's how you write memos. That's how you write, work emails. That's how you write business copy. And that's even how we're taught to write in school, right? You learn basic writing structure, and it's kind of, you start slow and then you build and then you make a case for your conclusion. And, working on thought reversals with the Video 4X methodology is really just flipping the script, pun intended, on doing that and writing that way, because you're starting with your conclusion. Really, you're starting at the end, or what most people would think is the end in more traditional writing. So if you're like me and you have a corporate background or you have an academic background, it's just natural to just build to your point slowly. But according to the Video 4X process and according to everything that Brandon teaches, if you're a listener of the podcast and you're here and you're not a student, you already know this. So I know I'm preaching to the choir. But persuading according to our process means that you're shifting limiting beliefs early on in your messaging. So whether that's a video script, a social post, an email, or a piece of your website copy, that persuasion part means that you're shifting the belief, you're identifying the belief first of all early on, and then you're shifting it and moving on. And so this is the biggest learning curve that I see folks make. And I just wanted to add that because I know Brandon just mentioned it, but I wanted to go into a little more detail. I've got my notes here. That I think especially for our students who are in industries where you have to define terms or you have to really set the stage so that your audience understands industry jargon, technical terms. So, for example, if you're in something like real estate, or you're a lawyer, or you're a finance advisor or financial advisor, and you have to, define your terms and explain a lot of things. So I understand that for those folks, this can be challenging. And it takes maybe a bit more intention and a bit more practice to really master the art of being persuasive and not just explaining. And so one of the ways you can do that, and this is what I do, because this is, again, my natural tendency as a creative writer, and I have a corporate background, we explain and describe and explain some more. So one of the things that I do is I always write my first draft, and then I go back and go, okay, Katie, what can I take out of this? And every single time, even to this day, there are always sentences that I didn't need. There are always things that I'm adding in that really are not concise, right? And things that are really distracting from our main points. So that's the main thing I would say for you. If this is something that you're struggling with, if you're like, oh, Brandon's so right, I get that. All my stuff is explaining, not persuading. Start here. Get your stuff down. Don't not do it and try to be perfect the first time. Get your draft down. Let it be messy. Let it be ugly. And then go back and just say, what can I take out? And usually from that point, the bare bones structure will start to sort of appear, right? It's kind of like, think of it like Michelangelo carving David into marble. Like it starts to appear and the masterpiece is there. It's just under all those extra words and extra fluff. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see. I wanted to build a little bit on what Brandon said and give you an exercise that I think will be helpful, that I recommend to our students as well, to try to overcome that. And for number 2, the second thing I want to talk about is specifically related to creating thought reversals. And I know that if you're in the Video 4X program, or you are a mentorship student, or you're a student in our thought reversal program, the structure and the outline. And if you're a reg podcast listener, then you have heard Brandon talk about this type of content, which, really at its basic form is where we take a limiting belief held by your audience or limiting belief in the industry, and we flip that belief and we show them, not tell them, we show them why it's not true, why it's hurtful, why it might be holding back their progress, whatever the case may be, and then we lead them into our new solution. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of things here about thought reversal specifically. So if you're working on those, then these will be for you. But one of the biggest mistakes that I see students make when I'm on one-on-one scripting calls, it was funny to hear Brandon mention earlier that I've done more scripting calls with his students than he has now, which is crazy because it feels like it's just gone by in the blink of an eye. But it's my favorite thing. I love having these calls with our students. And one of the big things that I see people do is they sit down and they craft a piece of content that is categorized as a thought reversal, right? They're going into it going, this is addressing a limiting belief. I'm going to shift the perspective. I'm going to show them the new way. And there's no actual shift of the belief, or what we would call the discredit section. So if you've seen any of Brandon's scripting methodology or heard him talk about this, you've probably heard this term already, but if not, just briefly, the discredit section of your script or piece of content, whatever you're working on, is the place in the script where you actually flip the limiting belief. So you may have seen Brandon's thought reversal video on not being afraid of the camera, right? So the limiting belief is, I'm afraid of the camera. So I can't do this course or I can't make videos because I'm afraid of the camera, right? And so the point of that video is to shift the belief and show them that they're actually not afraid of the camera. They're actually worried about perfectionism and judgment, okay? So what he does is he has a discredit section, and it comes really early on. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I think this is still on YouTube, so you can go find it. But it's something that we reference a lot in the program because it's a great example. And he shifts the belief. So the discredit part of the script is where he says, hey, you're telling me, most people are telling me that, that they're afraid of the camera. And I'm paraphrasing, by the way. I'm on the fly here. I'm not reading the script verbatim. But that belief is I'm afraid of the camera, so I can't make videos. And he says, have you ever taken a selfie or made a video of something with your family at home or in the backyard or with your kids? And he says, probably so, if you're like most people, right? So that tells me you're not afraid of the camera. You've already done it. And then he shifts the belief right there, and then he builds on that in the discredit. This is all the discredit. And he says, it's actually not about being afraid of the camera at all. What you're really afraid of is putting yourself out there and being judged. Or you're being a perfectionist because you don't like how you look on video, you don't like how you sound on video, you don't have a perfect setup, lighting, whatever it is. So that is an example of what a discredit is. And what is really common when folks are working on thought reversal content is they will create it with a limiting belief, and they've got their new way, and they're going to lead them into the solution, right? And there's no actual discredit in the script. And I know I'm getting really granular here and dialing down, but I hear this a lot from our students who are going, hey, my content feels off. I know it's a thought reversal, but something feels like it's missing. And this is one of the big things that I tell students to look for. So if you're working on your thought reversal, make sure that you actually have that section in your script where you flip the belief. Don't explain. Don't just say, you're not afraid of the camera. Like, why are you afraid of the camera? There's no reason to be afraid of the camera. There are however many billion selfies taken per year, or however many, home videos made on people's iPhones every year, right? That's all explaining. But what Brandon did is he used a persuasive language pattern and flipped the belief and showed them, hey, you've done this. So that shows me you're not really afraid. So in our course, in our program, we talk about, forming the discredit and actually shifting that belief through one or more persuasive language patterns. I'm not going to get into those today, but you're probably familiar with those if you listen to the podcast or if you're in the course. So it's important to make sure that you're using your persuasive tools and not explaining, but persuading. Otherwise, your whole thought reversal piece will feel off. And quite honestly, a little bit of tough love. If you don't have a discredit section or a section in your thought reversal piece where you're shifting the belief, it's not actually a thought reversal piece. It's just regular content. That is one of the key recipe ingredients for a thought reversal. So that's one of the other big things that I see students working on when they first start getting over that learning curve of creating this type of content. On to number 3, my third thing that I see students doing. I don't even want to call them mistakes. I keep tripping over that word because they're not mistakes. They're how you learn. They're how you grow. So if you're doing these things, if you're like, oh gosh, Coach Katie, this is me. This is what I'm doing in my scripts. Take a breath. It's okay. It's very normal. And like I said, I have some of these similar patterns and so many of our students do. And this is just a chance to grow and a chance to make it better. And you're probably undoing years of education or practice on writing and creating content a certain way. And it's all new. So I don't want to call it a mistake. I want to call it a growth moment. I think the title of this episode is mistakes our students are making in scripting. So I am going off the book here. I'm going rogue. It's Katie Soy going rogue. And I'm reframing these as growth moments. So my third growth moment, again, kind of sticking to this topic of thought reversal content, is when I see students bringing up the old belief, at the beginning of the script where you should, right? And you flip it with the discredit, great. And then I see them bringing up the old belief all the way through the entire script. And again, I'm saying script, but you can have thought reversal content in an Instagram post. You can have thought reversal content in an email, right? So that's the beauty of this methodology is you can have connection pieces and thought reversals in so many different ways. It's really learning this structure. And once you learn the structure, you can apply it to any piece of content, which is great. And so this is something that's common. And I have a funny story about this. Weird that the storyteller would have a funny story. But I'll throw myself under the bus. When I turned in my first draft of scripts, because I was hired as a coach for Brandon, and the plan was for me to work on my own scripts and have Brandon edit those, and we did that for several months when I first started. Because I had to learn the methodology and then prove that I could, coach people on this, right? So, I just was kind of thrown into the fire, and my first scripts, I remember him sending them back, and he was like, so Katie, I see that you can use these persuasive language patterns, because I had used, several. And he said, but you're just arguing and bringing up the old limiting belief 17 times all the way through your 3-minute script. And he said, this is not our structure. This is not what we do here. And I was like, but I had to demonstrate. I felt like I had to demonstrate and show that I was going to argue the heck out of these old beliefs and, just really, show that I could use multiple persuasive language patterns. And he said, why would you need to do this? All you need is one to show me that my belief's not true, to flip the belief, right? And a powerful content creator or a powerful messaging, wizard is going to be able to shift the belief once and it's done. So he's like, you keep coming back to all of these, points that bring up the limiting belief all the way through the script, and it just isn't needed. And beyond that is it takes us out of the persuasive flow. So one of the things I love about our thought reversal methodology is the way that Brandon's created this is that you shift the old belief in the first third to half of your script. I know this is getting really technical, but take your content piece, you're shifting the belief early on. And then the rest of the piece, you're really talking about your solution, your new way of doing things. You shift the belief and say, hey, I see that you're in pain. This is holding you back. This is keeping you in pain. It's wrong. It's harmful. It's costing you, right? Then you flip the belief. And then the rest of it is really giving people hope and saying, you've been doing it this way, but you can actually do it a whole new way. And that's what working with me is going to do. Or that's what I can show you. Or this is what my product helps you with. And so when you are bringing up the old limiting belief all the way through the piece, you take them out of that persuasive flow. Like once you've shifted them, you've got this beautiful, strong momentum with the rest of the piece focusing on the good things and what's possible for them, right? And what they can achieve or accomplish with your new way. And bringing up that old argument just keeps going back and brings them back into that old way. So we want to be conscious of making sure that other than our consequence stack at the very end of our piece, which should be like a sentence, you don't need to go into more and more paragraphs, about the old way or the old belief once you've shifted it. And so that's something that a lot of our folks do when they're learning. And it's something that I used to do. And that's kind of a funny story when I was like, oh, this isn't a good thing. This is not positive. And it's so true. It's so much more powerful when it's short, concise, and then you've got more time spent on the hope part of the content piece, right? Okay, one of my last growth moments that I see for our students on creating thought reversals is once you get into being persuasive, you learn that we use a lot of metaphors and examples to show, not tell, right? Stories, very powerful metaphors. That's one of the persuasive language patterns that we talk about using to shift beliefs. And one of the things that I see students do, and it can be really easy to do, is to use your own success or your own student's success as examples in your thought reversals. And this is not recommended because it comes across as biased. And biased content is the absolute opposite of persuasive content. And a good example of this, and I'm not going to get into a discussion here on politics at all, but we just came out of an election year in the USA, if you're listening. We just had an election year at the end of 2020. And I'm sure that whether you're in the US or not, if you see a piece of content written about the US election, the presidential election, it'd be pretty easy at a glance, like a split second, you can probably tell which side of the aisle that piece is coming from, right? Right? Like you're going, oh, that seems like a super liberal piece, or that seems like a really conservative take. It's obvious immediately, and our brain immediately shuts down and goes, oh, well, of course they're going to say that because that's what they think. Of course that party is going to diss the other party, right? I would expect that. Like whether you're a fan of Fox News or CNN or whatever, we expect certain pieces of content from those news sources. So when you add your success or your student's success as examples in your thought reversals to be persuasive, it's just simply not effective because it's biased. And the viewer, the listener, even though your intentions are pure, nobody who is a Video 4Xer or most likely a podcast listener is doing sleazy sales, right? That's not us. That's not your heart. I know that. But it does not come across in a persuasive way. And that is our absolute goal for thought reversals. So there are ways to share testimonials and student success stories, really positively. Brandon does this. If you've watched his video series, prior to his launches, you'll see him do this a lot. He talks about success stories often and testimonials, but he does not do it in a discredit in a thought reversal. He might do it in a connection piece. He might do it, if we're really breaking it down, he might do it in, the new way section of thought reversal. He might do it when he's openly just doing regular content, sharing student success stories and, sharing that social proof and establishing that credibility, but he's not doing it in the discredit because it just comes across like, of course you're going to say that, dude, it's your program. So that's something that people do too when they're first learning how to write this type of content, is they'll say, oh, Coach Katie, I've got a great example. My client just had amazing results with this. That's awesome. But if you can come up with examples of how this works in another industry or a metaphor, or use a different persuasive language pattern to shift that belief and show, not tell, that's going to be way more persuasive. The other thing I want to say about, and this actually works for thought reversal pieces and connection pieces, this would work for both, is when you are coming into the 4X program where you're starting to create this type of content, we ask you and we recommend, hey, like writing out those limiting beliefs we were just talking about for thought reversals, or the positive beliefs that we want to connect with our audience on for connection pieces. So we ask you to write those out and then craft titles for your videos, or, for your, it could be a subject line for email, whatever it is. And I see people getting really caught up in the details of phrasing the beliefs, and you have kind of really convoluted themes for the piece, which then leads to convoluted titles. And then the point of your messaging just really gets lost. You lose people. So I just want to encourage you guys, don't overthink it. Don't overthink the limiting belief. But here's a clue. Your limiting belief should not be 3 paragraphs long. That's not concise. Chances are, if your limiting belief is 3 sentences or 4 sentences, chances are we can make that more concise and you're overthinking it, okay? So gentle reminder, simple themes, simple titles. And these are going to be based off of your limiting beliefs and your positive beliefs that you want to connect on. But the more simple it is, the easier it is for the human mind to digest. And it's easier to craft effective messaging because you're not all over the place. This comes up too with connection pieces and thought reversal pieces, in that if you include too much, if you're including more than one belief, you should be doing 2 different pieces of content. So you wouldn't say, hey, you're afraid of the camera and you can't afford my program, and I'm going to do a script to, basically create a video to bust both of those objections. No, you would create 2 different scripts, right? Because we don't want to dilute the power of your messaging. And it's hard to argue multiple things at the same time, right? It's hard to make a case in your discredit and say, no, here's what I can actually do for you. That just gets really messy. So that's another thing I see that's kind of related to this concept of making sure things are simple, is folks will have, more than one belief listed, positive for connection or, limiting belief for thought reversal. And then the scripts kind of go all over the place because it's not simple and it's not as powerful. So really ask yourself, is this script or is this piece of content only looking at one belief? If it's more, take it out. You're doing more pieces of content. And this happens a lot on our one-on-one scripting calls with our mentorship students. It's frequently they'll come out of their calls with ideas for several more videos because, some of their titles were, including more than one belief or more than one thing that they were having to then discredit. And that is just not how we do things because it's not as persuasive. So don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it. It's kind of like the exercise I recommended at the beginning where, just take a look at your script and say, hey, is this title as short as it could be? Is it as concise as it could be? Is it as simply stated as possible? Can I take out extra words? Is it only, shifting one belief, or is there more than one belief here? So that is another thing that can be helpful if you find yourself doing that. And if you feel like your script is messy or you feel like your script is a little bit off and you don't know why, I would ask yourself that question and go, hey, is this targeting more than one belief? And can it be simplified? And that's going to be really helpful as you create content. And then I want to shift quickly to connection scripts. One thing that I see with our connection content, and again, if you're here, you probably know what that is, but this is content that, is meant to inspire and show people what's possible. And typically it's connected to your vision as a business owner and what becomes possible when people are operating in the new way and the new solution that you're going to teach them. So connections pieces are always built on positive beliefs that we want to connect on. And the biggest thing I see with this is interesting. There's a lot of overthinking on thought reversals, but on connection pieces, the biggest thing I see is people not leaning in and communicating their deeper purpose. And so frequently I'll see students on one-on-one calls and their connection scripts will tick off all the boxes for all the connection script ingredients, but it's off because they're not leaning in to actually sharing their vision and tuning in to the depth of what they can do for people. So I want to encourage you, if you have not gone through that part of the homework in the course, or if you're not in the course and you're listening and you haven't identified your deeper purpose in what you do, it's really important to be clear on that, because the energy of that comes out in your connection content. And the last thing I want is you guys to follow an outline structure and then the energy of what you do and how big the impact you're making in the world is, have it not be in the script or in the piece. So lean in, and this can be uncomfortable. I think for many of us, it's easier to rattle off what we do and learn the thought reversal or connection, structure, and plug in our limiting beliefs, right? It's like a plug and play formula, and then create our pieces without doing the internal work of touching base with what it is you're here to do and connecting into that. And I think this is what your connection scripts need. This is what it's based on. This is the whole point. So, when Brandon does connection videos, they just make people get goosebumps, right? They're inspiring. So lean into that. That's what I would encourage you to do. Lean into the depth of the impact that you're here to make in the world with your work. Lean into your power. Lean into the power of your work. Lean into the amazing, life-altering shifts that your work brings other people when they work with you, right? Not in an arrogant way. I'm talking about your deeper purpose, like why you're here to serve, like how what you do changes lives. And that's one thing that I see often in connection content pieces with our newer students, is that they're not leaning in, or they haven't identified it, or maybe they're afraid to actually admit how powerful their work is. So make sure you're doing that. And we're doing it in a compassionate way. We're doing it in a really helpful way. We're helping people. So I'm not saying this is in an arrogant way at all. I'm saying lean into the compassion, but own your power, right? And own the power of your work in the world. And, one thing that can be really easy to do when you're learning and you're just starting out is, again, just ticking off all the boxes and going through the outlines and not putting enough of yourself in the content. So I want to remind you that when you are creating your content pieces, whether it's thought reversal or connection or how to or what to do, whatever it is, your goal is to not be Brandon Lucero. And I know 100% he would back me up on this. Your goal is to not be Coach Katie. It's not to be another student in the group that you see, has a great script. The goal is to be yourself. And I just want to give you permission, if you haven't given it to yourself already, to be yourself in your content. That's the whole point. It's for you to put your unique stamp on this and showcase how you're serving people and how you can help, so that you are getting the customers into whatever it is that you do, so that you can serve them and change their lives. That's the goal. So you have to be you, and that might mean that you add a little humor into some of your scripts, or you're referencing movies you like, or whatever it is. But make sure that's there, that flavor, that spice, right? Because so often I'll see people that they'll use one persuasive language pattern because that's what they see on the outline, like on the the PDF in the course, or that's what they noticed that Brandon did in a video, which is great. Like, those are great examples there to help you. But then they only use that one because they said, oh, well, that's what Brandon does, so I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong. No. That is not why we're here. I would encourage you to use different language patterns for your discredits and thought reversals. I encourage you to put your own spin on things. Don't do something just because you only saw somebody else do it in the group and have success. Like, definitely use those for your advantage and for examples of what can work, but you got to be yourself. So that's what I want to end on today. Those are the biggest moments for growth or areas of growth that I see people making in their scripting and messaging that is really holding them back from being super effective in reaching their audience. And I want to just thank you guys all so much once again for listening. Thank you, Brandon, for having me as a guest host. This is so exciting. What an honor to be here and chat with all the New Gen podcast fam. And if you want to connect further with me, I would love to stay in touch. The best place to reach me would be my Instagram, which is at Miss Katie Soy, KatieSoy. My website is katiesoy.com. And if you are working on this kind of content and you want to share and tag me, I always love supporting our students when they're posting on social or, whatever it is. So I would love to stay in touch or connect there, and I will catch you guys on the next one. And let's throw it back over to Brandon.
Guys, that was today's episode, and hopefully you like this format and you found it super insightful. With that said, if you have not left us a review on iTunes, I'd be so grateful if you did. So head over to iTunes, leave us a review, and I'll see you on the next episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Take care.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.